Everyone rejected master's obese daughter. He gave her to his strongest slave. What happened next? In the sweltering heat of ancient Rome, where the sun baked the cobblestone streets of the eternal city, and the air hummed with the chatter of merchants and slaves alike, lived a wealthy patrician named Lucius Valerius. He was a man of considerable means, owner of vast estates sprawling across the hills of Latium, where olive groves stretched endlessly and vineyards produced the finest wines sipped by emperors. Lucius had built his fortune through shrewd dealings in the Forum, trading in silks from the East, spices from Arabia, and, most profitably, in the human cargo that fueled the empire's insatiable appetite for labor. His villa, perched on the Palatine Hill, was a marvel of marble columns, intricate mosaics depicting gods and heroes, and lush gardens where fountains whispered secrets to the wind. But for all his wealth and influence, Lucius carried a burden heavier than any chain he had ever forged for his slaves. It was his daughter, Antonia. At 25 years old, she was well past the age when most Roman women were married off to secure alliances or inheritances. Antonia was not like the lithe, graceful daughters of other noble families, whose slender forms and porcelain skin drew suitors like moths to a flame. No, Antonia was obese, her body a generous curve of flesh that society deemed unseemly, a flaw in the eyes of a culture obsessed with physical perfection. Her face, round and soft with cheeks that flushed easily, held a quiet beauty, eyes like deep pools of amber, framed by long lashes, and lips that curved into a gentle smile. But in a world where beauty was measured by the standards of Venus herself, Antonia's size made her an outcast among the elite. Lucius had tried everything to find her a husband. He hosted lavish banquets in his triclinium, where guests reclined on silk cushions and feasted on roasted peacocks, dormice stuffed with nuts, and honeyed figs. He paraded Antonia before potential suitors, young senators with ambitions, wealthy merchants seeking nobility, even grizzled generals fresh from campaigns in Gaul. Each time, he watched as their eyes flickered with polite interest, only to dim when they took in her full form. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Too heavy for childbearing," one would mutter. "She'll eat through his fortune," another joked behind cupped hands. Rejection after rejection piled up, each one a dagger to Lucius's heart. He loved his daughter fiercely, seeing in her the spirit of his late wife, who had died giving birth to her. Antonia was kind, intelligent, with a mind sharp as a gladius. She devoured scrolls on philosophy and poetry, quoting Virgil and Ovid with ease. But none of that mattered to the shallow men of Rome. As the years dragged on, Lucius's desperation grew. His hair, once dark and thick, turned silver with worry. He consulted augurs and priests, offering sacrifices at the temple of Juno, begging the goddess of marriage to intervene. But the omens were always ill, birds flying leftward, entrails twisted ominously. Friends advised him to send her to a distant province, perhaps to marry a frontier officer who wouldn't care about appearances. Others suggested more cruel measures, diets of vinegar and water, or even banishing her to a convent of Vestal virgins, though she was far too old for that. Lucius dismissed them all. Antonia was his only child, his heir, and he couldn't bear the thought of her suffering alone. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Lucius paced his atrium, the central courtyard of his villa alive with the scent of blooming roses. Slaves hurried about, lighting oil lamps that cast flickering shadows on the walls. Among them was Marcus, Lucius's strongest and most trusted slave. Captured in the wars against the Germanic tribes, Marcus was a towering figure, his body forged like iron from years of labor in the quarries and fields. His skin was bronzed by the sun, muscles rippling under scars from battles long past. Broad shoulders, a chiseled jaw, and eyes as blue as the Tiber on a clear day. Marcus was the epitome of strength, a man who could lift a fallen cart single-handedly or wrestle a wild boar to the ground. Yet, despite his ferocity, there was a quiet dignity about him. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice was deep and measured, carrying the weight of a philosopher trapped in a warrior's frame. Lucius had bought Marcus at auction 5 years prior, outbidding rivals who saw only a brute for the gladiatorial arenas. Instead, Lucius put him to work overseeing the other slaves, managing the estate's vineyards with an efficiency that increased yields twofold. Marcus never rebelled, never complained, though Lucius knew the fire of freedom burned in his heart. In quiet moments, Lucius had even shared wine with him, discussing the stars or the gods, treating him almost as an equal. But Marcus was still a slave, bound by law and collar. That night, as Lucius watched Marcus direct the evening chores, hauling water from the cistern, stacking firewood with effortless grace, a mad idea took root in his mind. If no free man would have Antonia, perhaps he could force a union that would at least give her companionship, a child to carry on the family name. Roman law allowed masters to command their slaves in all matters, including marriage. It was unconventional, scandalous even, but desperation breeds recklessness. Lucius summoned Marcus to his study, a room lined with scrolls and busts of ancestors staring down in silent judgment. "Marcus," Lucius began, his voice trembling slightly as he poured them both goblets of undiluted wine. "You have served me well these years. Your strength has been the backbone of this household." Marcus stood tall, his expression impassive, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "I do as commanded, master." Lucius paced, the mosaic floor cool under his sandaled feet. "My daughter, Antonia. She is unloved by the world. No man will take her as wife. But you are strong, loyal. I command you to marry her. You will live as husband and wife, give her children if the gods will it. In return, I will grant you freedoms, better quarters, lighter duties. Perhaps, one day, manumission." The words hung in the air like smoke from an incense burner. Marcus's face remained stoic, but inside, a storm raged. Marry the master's daughter? The obese girl he had glimpsed in the gardens, always alone with her books. He had pitied her from afar, seeing the loneliness in her eyes. But this? It was an insult wrapped in a gift. As a slave, refusal meant the whip or worse, the arena. He bowed his head. "As you command, master." Lucius clapped his hands, summoning Antonia. She entered hesitantly, her silken stola draped over her ample frame, her hair pinned with ivory combs. Her eyes widened in shock as her father explained the arrangement. "Father, no. This is madness. Marcus is a slave. He deserves his freedom, not to be chained to me." But Lucius was adamant. "It is done. The gods will judge us." The ceremony was swift, performed under the household lararium, the shrine to the family gods. A priest muttered blessings, sprinkling barley and salt. Marcus and Antonia exchanged vows, their hands joined by a ribbon. As the night fell, they were led to a chamber prepared for them, a bed strewn with rose petals, lamps glowing softly. Alone at last, Marcus turned to Antonia, his voice gentle despite the tension. "I will not force this upon you, my lady. We can pretend, for your father's sake." Antonia's eyes filled with tears, but there was a spark of gratitude. "Thank you, Marcus. But perhaps we can be friends?" And so began an unlikely union, born of despair and command. Little did they know, it would unravel secrets, ignite passions, and challenge the very foundations of their world. Part 2. Whispers in the night and the first sparks of something real. The bridal chamber was quieter than any room Marcus had ever known. The oil lamps burned low, casting long shadows across the frescoed walls where nymphs danced eternally in painted gardens. Rose petals, scattered earlier by giggling slave girls under the steward's orders, now lay crushed beneath their feet, releasing a cloying sweetness into the air. Outside, the distant hum of Rome at night drifted upward, drunken laughter from a nearby tavern, the creak of a cart on the Via Sacra, the occasional bark of a dog. Inside, however, only the sound of two people breathing too carefully. Antonia stood near the window, her back to Marcus, gazing out at the moonlit city as though it might offer her an escape. Her hands twisted the edge of her stola, the fine wool trembling between her fingers. She had dismissed her personal maid hours ago, unwilling to let anyone witness whatever humiliation the night might bring. Marcus remained by the door, arms folded across his broad chest, the iron collar at his throat catching the lamplight like a cruel reminder. Neither had moved toward the wide bed. Finally, Antonia spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You do not have to stay, Marcus. The door is not locked from the outside. My father will never know if you sleep in the stables tonight, or any night." Marcus studied her silhouette against the window, the generous curve of her shoulders, the way her dark hair fell in loose waves down her back. He had seen beautiful women before, the lithe dancers at his master's feasts, the proud wives of senators who looked through slaves as though they were furniture. None had ever spoken to him with such quiet dignity. "I gave my word," he said at last, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I will not shame you by fleeing on our wedding night." Antonia turned then, and for the first time he saw the tears glistening in her eyes. "It is not shame I fear for myself," she replied. "It is for you. You are a warrior, a free man in your heart. To be bound to me like this." Her voice cracked. "It is wrong." Marcus took one step closer, then stopped, as though afraid of startling her. "In Germania, my people choose their mates by strength and courage, not by the width of a waist or the sharpness of a cheekbone. Beauty fades. Character endures." He paused, searching for words in a language that still felt foreign on his tongue after 5 years. "Your father commands my body. He cannot command my thoughts." A small, sad laugh escaped her. "You are kinder than any patrician I have ever met." They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Antonia crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, not reclining as a bride might, but upright, hands folded in her lap like a child awaiting punishment. Marcus watched her, noting the way she held herself, shoulders back, chin high despite the tremor in her lower lip. There was steel in her, hidden beneath layers of softness the world refused to see. "Tell me about your home," she said suddenly. "Germania. Before the legions came." Marcus hesitated. Slaves did not speak of their pasts. It was considered dangerous, a seat of rebellion. But something in her voice, genuine curiosity, not the idle questions of a bored mistress, made him answer. He sat on a low stool across from her, keeping a respectful distance. "The forests are endless," he began. "Tall pines that block the sun, rivers so clear you can see fish darting like silver arrows. In winter, snow covers everything, and we hunt boar with spears. My tribe, the coerced, we sing around great fires. Songs of gods who walk the earth as wolves and eagles." His eyes grew distant. "I was to be chieftain one day. My father led our warriors against Rome, until the day the legions broke us." Antonia listened without interruption, her earlier fear melting into fascination. She asked questions about the women of his tribe, the rituals, the taste of mead brewed from wild honey. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The lamps guttered lower. At some point, Marcus rose to refill them, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he trimmed the wicks. When he returned, Antonia had kicked off her sandals and drawn her feet up onto the bed, hugging her knees. The pose made her look younger, less guarded. "And love?" she asked quietly. "How do your people choose whom to love?" Marcus considered this. "Love is not chosen. It chooses you. Like a storm. You do not ask the thunder why it strikes one tree and not another." Antonia smiled faintly. "In Rome, love is a transaction. Dowry, alliances, bloodlines. I was never a good bargain." "You are more than a bargain," he said, the words surprising even himself. The air between them shifted, subtle as a change in wind. Antonia looked at him fully now, taking in the strong lines of his face, the scars that crossed his arms like stories written in flesh. For the first time, she saw not a slave, but a man. "I am tired of being unseen," she whispered. Marcus rose slowly and crossed the room. He did not touch her, but knelt so their eyes were level. "Then let me see you." It was not passion that moved them that night. Not yet. It was something gentler, more tentative. Antonia reached out first, her fingers brushing the rough stubble along his jaw. Marcus closed his eyes at the touch, as though it were the first kindness he had known in years. When he opened them again, There was no command in his gaze, no obligation, only curiosity, and perhaps the faintest flicker of wonder. They lay side by side on the wide bed, fully clothed, speaking in low voices until the lamps burned out entirely. Antonia told him of her childhood, of a mother she barely remembered, of lonely hours in the women's quarters reading forbidden scrolls on astronomy and Greek philosophy. Marcus spoke of battles, of brothers lost, of the day Roman soldiers dragged him away in chains while his village burned. At some point, exhaustion claimed them. Antonia woke once in the night to find Marcus's arm draped protectively across her waist, his breathing deep and even. She did not move away. Instead, she let herself relax into the warmth of another human being, the first time anyone had held her without judgment. Morning came too soon. Sunlight filtered through the lattice window, painting golden stripes across the floor. Servants would soon knock with breakfast trays. The household would expect evidence of a consummated marriage. Antonia stirred, feeling the solid weight of Marcus beside her. He woke instantly, warrior's instincts sharp even in sleep. "We should," she began, cheeks flushing. Marcus understood. He rose and straightened his tunic, then helped her arrange her hair with surprising tenderness for hands so large. When the knock finally came, they were sitting properly apart, Antonia at her dressing table, Marcus standing respectfully near the door. But something had changed irrevocably in the night. The space between them no longer felt like a chasm. Over the following weeks, the household buzzed with gossip. The master's daughter and the barbarian slave married. Some slaves pitied Marcus, assuming he had been forced into a thankless union. Others envied him the softer duties and private quarters. Lucius watched from afar, satisfied that his command was obeyed, though he noticed his daughter smiled more often, her eyes brighter when she walked the gardens. Antonia and Marcus fell into a quiet rhythm. By day, he oversaw the vineyards as before, but now returned each evening to their shared chamber. They talked endlessly about books, stars, gods both Roman and Germanic. Marcus taught her words in his language. She taught him to read Latin scrolls by lamplight. When other slaves were near, they maintained the proper distance of mistress and servant. Alone, barriers dissolved. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in the fields, Marcus returned covered in dust and sweat. Antonia waited with a basin of warm water and a cloth. Without a word, she began washing the grime from his arms and neck. Her touch was careful, almost reverent. Marcus caught her hand midway, his calloused fingers enveloping hers. "You do not have to serve me," he said gruffly. "I want to," she replied simply. "Let me care for you as you have cared for me." That night, the final walls crumbled. When Marcus kissed her, slow, deliberate, asking rather than taking, Antonia responded with a hunger that surprised them both. There was no awkwardness, no shame, only discovery. Her body, so long a source of ridicule, became a landscape he explored with awe and gentleness. He traced every curve, every fold, whispering words in his own tongue that made her shiver. For the first time in her life, Antonia felt desired, not in spite of her form, but because of it. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, moonlight spilling across their skin. Marcus pressed his lips to her shoulder. "You are beautiful," he murmured, and she believed him. But Rome was not a city that allowed such unions to remain hidden forever. Whispers reached the ears of Lucius's peers. Senators who had once rejected Antonia now laughed behind their hands at the scandal. And worse, a jealous overseer, resentful of Marcus's favored status, began watching them closely, waiting for a misstep that could bring the barbarian low. In the quiet of their chamber, neither Marcus nor Antonia yet knew how fiercely the world would soon test what they had only just begun to build. The days following their true union felt like a dream woven from sunlight and stolen moments. Antonia and Marcus moved through their shared life with a newfound ease, as though the gods themselves had blessed their unlikely bond. By morning, Marcus would rise before dawn, slipping out to tend the vineyards before the sun scorched the earth. Antonia would linger in bed a little longer, tracing the imprint of his body on the sheets, smiling at the memory of his touch. When he returned for the midday meal, they ate together in the privacy of their chamber, simple fare of bread, olives, and cheese, but shared with laughter and lingering glances that spoke volumes. Lucius noticed the change in his daughter. Her cheeks glowed with a healthy flush. Her laughter echoed through the villa's corridors more freely. He congratulated himself on his decision, seeing it as proof of his wisdom. "See how content she is," he boasted to a visiting merchant over wine one afternoon. "The barbarian brings her joy. Better a strong slave than no husband at all." The merchant nodded politely, but his eyes gleamed with something sharper, amusement, perhaps, or calculation. Word of the marriage had spread like wildfire through Rome's elite circles, carried on the tongues of gossiping slaves and envious neighbors. Not everyone shared Lucius's satisfaction. Among the household staff, resentment simmered like a pot left too long on the fire. Marcus, once just another laborer, now enjoyed privileges that rankled: a private room, lighter duties, even the right to dine with the family on occasion. The other slaves whispered in the kitchens and stables, their voices low and bitter. "Why him?" they'd mutter. "Because he's big and strong? We've all bled for this house." But it was Gaius, the overseer, who harbored the deepest grudge. Gaius had served Lucius for over a decade, rising from a lowly field hand to the position of managing the estate's slaves. Short and wiry, with a face pocked by old pox scars and eyes that darted like a rat's, he prided himself on his efficiency. He cracked the whip, literally, when quotas lagged, and reported every infraction to Lucius with a zeal that bordered on fanaticism. But Marcus's arrival had stolen his thunder. The Germans' natural leadership meant the slaves worked harder without the need for constant threats, making Gaius seem almost unnecessary. And now, with Marcus elevated to husband of the master's daughter, it was an insult Gaius could not stomach. He watched them obsessively. From the shadows of the olive groves, he'd seen Marcus return from the fields, Antonia waiting at the villa's gate with a cup of watered wine. They'd exchange a brief touch, a hand on an arm, fingers brushing, that spoke of intimacy far beyond master and slave. At night, Gaius lingered near their chamber door, ears pressed to the wood, catching muffled laughter and sighs that confirmed his suspicions. "Disgusting," he'd spit to himself. "A fat sow and a filthy barbarian. The gods will punish this abomination." Gaius's envy festered into a plan. He began spreading subtle poisons. A dropped word to Lucius about Marcus's laziness in the fields. A rumor among the slaves that the German was plotting escape with Antonia's help. But these were mere skirmishes. The real blow came one sweltering afternoon when Lucius hosted a gathering of old friends, senators and equestrians reclining in the triclinium, debating politics and trade, while slaves served platters of roasted quail and garum sauce. Gaius waited until the wine flowed freely, loosening tongues. As he refilled goblets, he leaned close to Senator Publius, a portly man who had once courted Antonia and rejected her harshly. "Pardon my boldness, Dominus," Gaius murmured, "but have you heard the latest about the master's arrangement?" Publius's eyebrows rose, intrigued. "The slave marriage? What of it?" Gaius glanced around, feigning reluctance. "The barbarian grows bold. Whispers say he's bedding the daughter nightly, but not out of duty. No, it's lust and ambition. He speaks of freedom, of taking her away to his savage lands. I've seen letters in her chamber, written in some barbaric tongue. If not stopped, he might poison the master himself to claim the estate." It was a lie, of course, crafted from half-truths and venom. But in a city rife with intrigue and betrayal, it landed like a well-aimed dart. Publius's face darkened. By evening's end, the rumor had taken root among the guests. Lucius overheard fragments as he bid farewell. Dangerous precedent: barbarian blood in noble lines must intervene. That night, Lucius summoned Marcus to his study. Antonia was away visiting a childhood friend in the city, oblivious to the gathering clouds. Marcus entered, still dusty from the fields, and bowed low. "You called for me, master?" Lucius paced, his face thunderous. "Is it true? Do you plot against me? Speak of escape with my daughter?" Marcus straightened, surprise flickering across his features before settling into calm resolve. "No, master. I have served you faithfully. Antonia and we care for each other. That is all. Lucius slammed his fist on the desk. You are a slave. She is my heir. If rumors spread that you're influencing her, seducing her for gain, God's man, they'll crucify you and disgrace us all. Marcus met his gaze steadily. I love her, Lucius. Not for your wealth or name. For her heart, her mind. She sees me as a man, not a tool. The use of his name without title was a slip, born of emotion. Lucius's eyes widened. For a moment, he saw not the slave, but the warrior who had earned his respect. But fear, of scandal, of losing control, overrode it. You will cease this. Intimacy. Sleep separately. Focus on your duties. Or by Jupiter, I'll sell you to the mines. Marcus bowed again, but his jaw tightened. As you command. He left the study, heart heavy, knowing he must warn Antonia. She returned just after sunset, her litter carried by slaves through the villa gates. Marcus intercepted her in the garden, pulling her behind a screen of blooming jasmine. The scent enveloped them as he whispered urgently, Your father knows of the rumors. He forbids us from sharing a bed, says it endangers us all. Antonia's face paled. Rumors? From whom? The overseer, I suspect. Gaius hates me. But we must be careful now. Act as master and slave in public. At night, he trailed off, frustration evident. Antonia gripped his arm. I won't lose you. Not after finding you. They stole a brief kiss, fierce and desperate, before separating. That night, they slept apart. Antonia in her old chamber, Marcus in the slaves' quarters. The bed felt vast and empty without him. Sleep eluded her as she stared at the ceiling, mind racing. The next days were a torment of pretense. In daylight, they barely spoke. Marcus toiled harder in the fields, proving his loyalty. Antonia attended social functions with her father, smiling through gritted teeth as matrons whispered behind fans. But at night, when the household slept, they found ways to meet. A hidden alcove in the gardens became their sanctuary, whispered conversations under the stars, hands clasped in the dark. Tell me of your forests again, she'd say, leaning against his shoulder. He described them vividly, painting pictures with words until she could almost smell the pine and hear the wolves howl. Their stolen moments deepened their bond. One night, as they lay on a blanket beneath an olive tree, Marcus traced patterns on her palm. In my tribe, lovers swear oaths on the blood moon, promises that bind beyond death. Antonia smiled, her heart aching with love. Then swear it to me. He pricked his thumb with a thorn, then hers, pressing their blood together. By the gods of earth and sky, I am yours, forever. Tears stung her eyes. And I yours. But secrecy bred tension. Gaius's spies reported their absences. The overseer bided his time, gathering more evidence. A dropped hairpin in the garden, a slave who swore he saw shadows embracing. He planned his final strike, a letter to the Praetorian Guard, accusing Marcus of sedition and Antonia of treasonous alliance with a barbarian. Meanwhile, Antonia discovered she was with child. A missed cycle, a wave of nausea in the mornings. It was early, but certain. She told Marcus in their hidden spot, watching his face transform from shock to joy. A child, he breathed, pulling her close. Our child. For a moment, hope flared bright. But as they parted that night, neither knew Gaius lurked in the shadows, having overheard every word. The storm was about to break. The next morning, soldiers arrived at the villa gates, their armor glinting in the sun. Gaius stood smugly beside them as Lucius was roused from his bed. What is the meaning of this? Lucius demanded. The centurion unrolled a scroll. Lucius Valerius, your slave Marcus is accused of plotting against Rome, and your daughter of aiding him. They must be taken for questioning. Antonia, hearing the commotion, rushed out, her face ashen. Marcus was already being bound, his eyes meeting hers in silent promise. I will protect you. As the soldiers dragged him away, Antonia collapsed to her knees, one hand instinctively cradling her still flat belly. The dream was shattering, and the real battle had only just begun. The Mamertine prison squatted at the foot of the Capitoline Hill like a stone toad, its entrance a narrow hole in the ground that swallowed men whole. Marcus was dragged down the slick stone steps into the lower dungeon, the Tullianum, where Rome kept those it intended to forget. The air hit him first, thick, fetid, reeking of rot, piss, and despair. Torchlight barely reached the chamber. The only natural light came from a small opening high in the wall, through which the guards occasionally lowered food or, more often, nothing at all. They stripped him of his tunic, chained his wrists and ankles to iron rings bolted into the wall, and left him in near darkness. The chains were short. He could not stand fully upright, nor sit comfortably. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop a mocking reminder of time passing. Marcus had known captivity before. After the battle that broke his tribe, he had been marched in chains to Rome. But this was different. This was not defeat in war. This was betrayal, born of envy and lies. For the first day, he endured in silence, conserving strength, listening. The prison held others. A murmuring Greek philosopher accused of treason, a pair of thieves awaiting crucifixion, a former praetorian who had fallen foul of palace politics. Their voices rose and fell like waves. Marcus spoke to none of them. His mind was only on Antonia. Was she safe? Had she revealed the child? Would Lucius protect her, or cast her out to save face? Back at the villa, chaos reigned. Antonia stood in the atrium as the soldiers departed with Marcus, her knees threatening to buckle. Lucius stormed about, barking orders at slaves who scattered like frightened birds. Gaius lingered near the impluvium, the shallow pool catching rainwater, pretending to oversee the cleanup while savoring his triumph. "Father," Antonia said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "This is madness. Marcus has done nothing wrong." Lucius whirled on her, face purple with rage and fear. "Nothing wrong? A slave accused of sedition. By the gods, girl, do you know what this means for our name? The Senate will hear of it. My enemies will feast on this scandal. He is innocent," she insisted, stepping forward. "And I carry his child." The words hung in the air. Lucius froze. Gaius's eyes widened, then narrowed with malicious glee. Lucius stared at his daughter as though seeing her for the first time. "Child?" he repeated hoarsely. "You with a slave?" Antonia lifted her chin. "Your slave. The man you forced me to marry." "Yes, father. Your grandchild grows inside me." For a moment, Lucius seemed to age 10 years. He sank onto a marble bench, head in his hands. "What have I done?" he whispered. Gaius seized the opening. "Master, this proves the danger. The barbarian has corrupted her. She defends him even now. Who knows what plots they've hatched together?" Antonia turned on the overseer, eyes blazing. "You! This is your doing, isn't it? I've seen you watching, listening at doors like a jackal. You spread these lies." Gaius feigned shock. "My lady, I only reported what I heard with my own ears. Whispers of escape, of taking you north to his savage tribes." "Liar!" she cried. "Father, send for the centurion. Let me speak to him. I will swear before the gods that Marcus is loyal." But Lucius was beyond reason, panic gripping him. Rome was merciless to those tainted by treason. Families were ruined, fortunes confiscated. "No," he said finally. "We will wait. The inquiry will reveal the truth. Until then, you will remain in your chamber. Guards at the door." Antonia was confined, a prisoner in her own home. Meals were brought, but she touched little. Nights were the worst, lying alone in the bed that still smelled faintly of Marcus, her hand resting on her belly where new life stirred. She whispered to the child in the dark, promising that its father would return. 3 days passed. In the prison, the guards came for Marcus. They hauled him up the steps to a small interrogation chamber lit by flickering torches. A tribunal of 3 men waited: the centurion who had arrested him, a scribe, and a stern-faced magistrate sent from the praetorian prefect. They asked the same questions again and again. "Did you plot escape? Have you spoken against the emperor? Did you seduce the daughter to gain power?" Marcus answered calmly each time, "No, I love Antonia." I serve my master faithfully. They beat him with rods when answers displeased them. Blood ran down his back, but he did not cry out. On the second session, they used the whip. Still, he held firm. On the fourth day, they brought a new tactic. The magistrate leaned forward. Your woman has confessed everything. He lied smoothly. She says you forced her, threatened her father. Save yourself, barbarian. Admit your guilt, and we may show mercy, send you to the mines instead of the cross. Marcus lifted his head, blood crusting his lip. Antonia would never say such things. You lie. The magistrate smiled coldly. We shall see. That same afternoon, Antonia was summoned to the villa's tablinum, the formal receiving room. The centurion waited with 2 soldiers. Lucius stood to the side, face ashen, unable to meet her eyes. My lady, the centurion began, your slave accuses you of complicity. He claims you planned to flee Rome together, taking your father's wealth. Antonia's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. That is false. Marcus would never say such a thing. The centurion produced a document. His confession, signed with his mark. She glanced at it, scrawled X at the bottom, but the handwriting above was too neat, too Roman. He cannot write Latin, she said quietly. This is a forgery. The centurion's expression flickered. Careful, woman. Accusations of forgery are serious. I accuse nothing, she replied. I state fact, and I demand to see him. That is not possible. Then take me before the prefect himself. I will speak the truth. Lucius finally intervened, voice cracking. Enough, centurion. My daughter is with child. She is distraught. Give us time. Time runs short, Lucius Valerius, the centurion said. The prefect wants this resolved quietly. If the slave confesses fully, perhaps the matter ends with him. If not, he let the threat hang. After they left, Lucius collapsed into a chair. Antonia knelt before him. Father, listen to me. Marcus is loyal. Gaius is the poison here. Dismiss him. Pay the fine, whatever it takes. Free Marcus. Lucius looked at her, eyes wet. It may be too late. If the prefect believes treason, Antonia made a decision then, born of desperation and love. That night, with the household asleep, she bribed her door guard, a young slave who had always been kind, with a gold bracelet from her jewelry box. Slipping through the shadows, she made her way to the city, veiled and alone. She went first to the home of Claudia, an old friend from her girlhood, married to a tribune with influence in the Praetorian Guard. Claudia listened in stunned silence as Antonia poured out the story. Tears, accusations, forged confessions. By the gods, Claudia whispered, this is monstrous. My husband owes your father favors from old campaigns. I will speak to him tonight. From there, Antonia risked more. She sought out Senator Publius, the very man who had once rejected her. Pride burned, but the child and Marcus mattered more. Publius received her in his atrium, curiosity outweighing disdain. You come to me? He asked, eyebrow arched. After I declined your hand? I come for justice, Antonia said. You dined with my father when these rumors began. You know they are lies spread by a jealous slave. Help me and restore honor to my house, and yours, for having believed gossip. Publius considered. Scandal touched all who brushed against it. Better to quash it. I will speak to the prefect, he said at last. But there will be a price. Your father must withdraw from certain trade dealings I covet. Antonia agreed without hesitation. The wheels of influence began to turn. In the prison, Marcus weakened. Infection set in from the whip lashes. Fever burned through him. In delirium, he saw visions of Germania, of running through forests with Antonia, their child laughing at their side. He clung to those images, refusing the guards' offers of easier confession. On the 7th day, everything changed. The prison door opened, and the centurion himself descended with guards. They unchained Marcus, wrapped a rough cloak around his bleeding shoulders. You're free, the centurion grunted, avoiding his eyes. Charges dropped. Influence from high places. Marcus could barely stand. Antonia? He rasped. Safe. waiting. They carried him out on a litter through the streets of Rome, the city blurring past. When the villa gates opened and he saw her running toward him, round her now, eyes bright with tears, Marcus found strength he did not know he had. She reached him, hands framing his bruised face. "You're home," she whispered. Behind them, Gaius was being dragged away in chains, his lies exposed by the forged document and Antonia's relentless pursuit of truth. Lucius watched from the portico, face etched with shame and relief. As Marcus was carried inside to be tended by the household physician, Antonia walked beside the litter, her hand clasped in his. The worst had come, and they had survived, but Rome was not done with them yet. Powerful men now held debts over their house, and a child of mixed blood would soon draw even sharper scrutiny. Yet in that moment, with Marcus's fingers tight around hers, Antonia felt unbreakable. Months slipped by like sun through an hourglass. Marcus healed slowly, the scars on his back fading to silver lines that Antonia traced with gentle fingers on quiet nights. The villa settled into an uneasy peace. Gaius had vanished into the salt mines of Sardinia. No one spoke his name again, and Lucius, humbled by how close he had come to losing everything, kept his distance from the couple. He no longer issued commands about their marriage bed or Marcus's duties. Instead, he watched from afar as Antonia's belly rounded beneath her stola, a mixture of pride and apprehension in his eyes. Rome, however, did not forget so easily. Senator Publius and the others who had intervened expected payment. Lucius quietly ceded profitable trade routes along the Tiber docks and withdrew from a lucrative contract supplying grain to the legions in Pannonia. The family's wealth diminished, but it remained intact. Whispers still circulated in the baths and forums. The Valerius girl carrying a half-barbarian child, the old patrician brought low by his own desperation. Invitations to banquets dwindled. Old friends crossed the street to avoid greetings. Antonia felt the sting, but it mattered less with each passing day. She had Marcus. She had the child. Everything else seemed negotiable. Marcus, for his part, threw himself into the estate with renewed vigor. He expanded the vineyards, grafting new vines he remembered from Germanic hillsides, hardier stock that promised richer harvests. Slaves followed him willingly now, not out of fear but respect. In the evenings, he and Antonia walked the gardens together, her arm looped through his large hand resting protectively over the swell of her belly. "Do you feel it?" she asked one twilight, guiding his palm lower. A firm kick answered. Marcus's face broke into a grin so wide it made him look boyish despite the scars and the iron collar he still wore. Lucius had not yet granted manumission, wary of further scandal. "Our son is strong," Marcus said with certainty. "Or daughter," Antonia teased. He shook his head. "A warrior. I feel it." They had chosen names already. If a boy, Arminius, after the great coerced chieftain who had once crushed 3 Roman legions in the Teutoburg forest, a bold choice that would raise eyebrows. If a girl, Livia, in quiet deference to Roman tradition. As summer bled into autumn, Antonia grew heavier, her movements slower. The midwife, an experienced Greek woman named Phoebe, visited often, clucking approvingly at the child's position and strength. "Healthy as a young ox," she declared. "You will deliver before the calends of December." Lucius summoned the courage to speak to his daughter one afternoon in the atrium. He had aged visibly, hair now fully white, hands trembling slightly as he held a scroll he wasn't reading. "Antonia," he began, voice rough, "I have wronged you both. I thought I was saving you. Instead, I nearly destroyed you." She placed her hand over his. "Father, you gave me the greatest gift. Without your command, I would never have known him." Lucius glanced toward the gardens where Marcus was directing the olive harvest. "He is a better man than most I tried to force upon you. When the child is born, I will free him, publicly. Let Rome gossip. My grandson or granddaughter will not be born to a slave father." Tears welled in Antonia's eyes. "Thank you." The birth came sooner than expected. A week before the predicted time, in the dead of night, Antonia woke Marcus with a sharp gasp. "It begins." What followed was a blur of pain and urgency. Phoebe arrived swiftly, barking orders at the household slaves. Hot water, clean linens, herbs to ease the labor. Marcus refused to leave the chamber, ignoring Roman custom that men stayed far from birthing rooms. He knelt at Antonia's side, letting her crush his hand as contraction after contraction racked her body. Hours passed. Dawn painted the sky rose and gold. Antonia, drenched in sweat, hair plastered to her forehead, cried out as Phoebe urged her to push one final time. A lusty wail filled the room. "A boy," Phoebe announced triumphantly, wrapping the squalling infant in soft cloth before placing him in Antonia's trembling arms. He was perfect, dark hair like his mother's, but with Marcus's strong brow already evident. His tiny fists flailed as though ready to take on the world. Marcus stared in awe, tears tracking down his cheeks. "Arminius," he whispered, voice breaking. Antonia laughed weakly through her own tears. "He has your nose already." Lucius entered soon after, summoned by an excited slave. He approached the bed hesitantly, gazing at his grandson. Something softened in his expression, the hard lines of a lifetime in Roman politics melting away. "He is beautiful," the old man said simply. Then, louder, so the gathered household could hear. "Let it be known, today I grant Marcus his freedom. He is no longer slave, but libertus of this house. And this child, my grandson Arminius Valerius, is my heir." A murmur rippled through the slaves. Some cheered quietly. Marcus bowed his head, the weight of the iron collar suddenly unbearable in a new way. That afternoon, in a small ceremony before the household gods, Lucius himself struck the collar from Marcus's neck. The clanging of metal on marble echoed like a bell of liberty. In the days that followed, the villa felt transformed. Marcus walked taller, no longer averting his eyes when passing free men on the streets. Antonia recovered swiftly, her body strong despite the ordeal, and soon sat in the garden nursing little Arminius while Marcus worked nearby, stealing glances at mother and son. Yet peace, in Rome, was always fragile. Word of the freedman and his noble-born son spread quickly. Some saw it as a heartwarming tale of redemption, others, a dangerous precedent. Whispers reached the ears of conservative senators who feared barbarian blood-diluting Roman purity. And farther north, in the forests Marcus had once called home, rumors traveled differently. The lost warrior had sired a son with a Roman noblewoman, a bridge between worlds. Neither Marcus nor Antonia knew it yet, but their child would one day force them to choose between the empire that had enslaved one parent and nearly destroyed the other, and the wild freedom calling from beyond the frontier. For now, though, there was only the warmth of a new family. Marcus held his son for the first time under a clear autumn sky, the baby's tiny hand wrapped around one of his father's fingers. "We made it," Antonia murmured, leaning against Marcus's shoulder. He kissed her temple. "No, my love, we are only beginning." Years flowed like the Tiber after spring rains, swift, relentless, carrying everything toward the sea. Little Arminius grew strong and wild in the villa's gardens, his dark curls bouncing as he chased butterflies or wrestled with the slave boys under Marcus's watchful eye. By his 7th year, he could already draw a small bow Marcus had carved for him, loosing arrows with a precision that made the old freedman's chest swell with pride. Antonia watched them from the portico, her heart full yet quietly uneasy. Their son had his father's blue eyes and fearless spirit, but he also carried the weight of two worlds on his narrow shoulders. Rome had not forgotten them. Lucius died peacefully in his sleep when Arminius was 5, leaving the estate to his grandson with Marcus named guardian until the boy reached manhood. The will was read before the family shrine, and though a few distant cousins grumbled in the courts, the document held. Marcus, once a slave, now managed one of the largest estates in Latium. He did it well, expanding the vineyards, treating the workers fairly, even freeing a dozen of the oldest slaves with his own coin. Neighbors who once shunned them now came seeking advice on grafting techniques or loans for their own harvests. Yet acceptance remained thin as parchment. At the baths, men still called Arminius the little barbarian behind his back. Marcus felt the pull of his homeland more keenly with each passing season. Letters reached them, smuggled by Germanic traders along the Amber Route, from survivors of his tribe. The Cherusci had rebuilt in the shadowed forests beyond the Rhine. A new generation of warriors spoke of the lost son of their former chieftain, the one taken by Rome, whispering that his return with a half-Roman heir could unite the tribes as never before. They needed a symbol, a bridge. They needed Arminius. One autumn evening, as the family dined in the triclinium beneath frescoes of hunting scenes, a traveler arrived at the gates. Tall, cloaked in wolfskin, with tribal tattoos peeking from beneath his sleeves. He spoke Latin with a thick accent. His name was Segimer, Marcus's younger cousin. He had crossed the frontier at great risk. That night, after Arminius was asleep, Segimer sat with Marcus and Antonia by the brazier in the atrium. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "The tribes grow restless," Segimer said, his voice low. "Rome presses harder, new forts along the river, taxes that starve villages. The old men speak of the great victory in Teutoburg, of your father's name. They say his blood runs in your son. Bring the boy north, brother. Let him learn our ways, our tongue, our gods. He could be the one to hold the tribes together when Rome comes again." Marcus stared into the flames, memories flooding back. The smell of pine, the howl of wolves, the songs around great bonfires. He glanced at Antonia, whose face had gone pale. "And leave Rome?" she asked quietly. "Leave everything we have built?" Segimer's gaze softened. "Not forever, but the boy must know who he is. Half of him is Cherusci. If he stays here, Rome will grind that half away." The words hung heavy. Marcus reached for Antonia's hand. They had spoken of this in whispers over the years, but never with such urgency. After Segimer retired to a guest chamber, Marcus and Antonia walked the moonlit gardens. Arminius's laughter from earlier still seemed to echo among the cypress trees. "I cannot lose him," Antonia said, voice breaking. "He is our son, and he is my people's hope." Marcus replied, pain etching his features. "If war comes again, and it will, he could save thousands, or doom them if he stands only with Rome." They stood in silence beneath the stars. Finally, Antonia spoke. "Then we go together, all of us. If our son is to be a bridge, let us build it with our own hands." Marcus pulled her close, astonishment and love whirling in his eyes. "You would leave Rome? Your home, your friends?" "I left that world the day I married you," she said simply. "My home is wherever you and Arminius are." Preparations were made in secret. Marcus sold portions of the estate to trusted neighbors, converting wealth into gold that could travel. Slaves who wished it were freed. Others were given generous severance. Segimer trained young Arminius in the evenings, teaching him the Germanic tongue, stories of gods who walked as beasts, the feel of a real longsword balanced in small hands. On the night before departure, Antonia stood in the lararium, the household shrine. She poured wine for the layers, the guardian spirits of the house, then did something no Roman woman had likely ever done. She added a small offering of mead for the Germanic gods Marcus had taught her to honor. "Protect us all," she whispered to both pantheons. "Let our son unite, not divide." Dawn broke cold and clear as the small party slipped away. Marcus, Antonia, Arminius, Segimer, and a handful of trusted freedmen. They traveled north disguised as merchants, following the old Amber Road. Behind them, Rome's 7 hills faded into memory. Ahead lay forests deeper than any dream. Years later, historians would argue over the man who came to be called Arminius, not the child, but the leader who rose among the Germanic tribes. Some said he was purely Cherusci, a savage genius who ambushed Varus in the Teutoburg forest and halted Rome's eastward march for generations. Others whispered that his victories owed something to Roman discipline learned at his mother's knee, to tactics discussed over villa dinners long ago. The truth was simpler and far more extraordinary. In a clearing deep in the northern forests, a grown warrior with blue eyes and a Roman education stood before assembled chieftains. Beside him, aged but unbowed, stood his father, once a slave, now an elder respected by all. And at his side, silver-haired yet radiant, his mother, the Roman noblewoman who had chosen love over empire. They had built the bridge together. And because of it, two worlds, forever changed, did not destroy each other that generation. The child rejected by Rome had become the man who saved his father's people, not through hatred, but through understanding born of a mother's courage and a father's unbreakable spirit. In the end, the greatest victory was not won on any battlefield. It was won in a rose-scented chamber years before, when a lonely woman and a chained warrior looked past the world's judgment and chose to see each other.